If you've spent any time in the XRP community, you've probably heard people say something that sounds completely unbelievable. XRP needs a much higher price to work properly. Some people even argue that XRP can't support global payments unless it's worth hundreds, thousands, or even more per coin. At first, that sounds ridiculous. After all, Bitcoin processes transactions at different prices every day. Stablecoins stay close to $1, so why would XRP be any different? Does XRP actually need a higher price? Or is this just another theory that's been repeated so many times that people started accepting it as fact? Today, we're going to separate logic from speculation and answer one of the biggest questions in the XRP community. Because the truth is a lot more interesting than most people realize. Let's start with something important. There is no official statement from Ripple saying that XRP must reach a specific price in order to function. You won't find a document saying XRP has to be $100, $1,000, or any other number before banks can use it. That's simply not how the technology works. The XRP Ledger can process transactions whether XRP is trading at $1, $10, or $100. The network itself doesn't suddenly become faster because the price increases. So if that's true, why do people keep saying XRP needs a higher price? The answer isn't about speed. It isn't about technology. It's about liquidity, and liquidity is one of the most misunderstood concepts in crypto. Think about it like this. Imagine you want to move $10 million from one country to another. If each XRP is worth $1, you'd need around 10 million XRP to move that value. Now imagine XRP is worth $100. Suddenly, you'd only need around 100,000 XRP to transfer the exact same amount of money. The value being transferred hasn't changed. The number of XRP required has. Now imagine those numbers getting even bigger. Instead of millions, think billions, or even trillions of dollars moving through financial systems. This is where the conversation changes. Supporters of XRP often argue that if the asset is ever used for very large-scale settlement between financial institutions, a higher price could allow the same amount of value to move using fewer tokens. Notice something important. That isn't the same as saying a higher price is required. It's saying a higher price could make it more capital efficient if XRP were ever used at a massive global scale. Those are two completely different ideas. And this is where a lot of confusion begins. Some people hear that explanation and immediately jump to the conclusion that XRP must reach an extremely high price. Others hear the same explanation and assume it's impossible. The reality is much more balanced. Understanding why people make this argument doesn't automatically prove they'll be right. It simply helps explain the logic behind one of the most debated ideas in the XRP community. So let's take this one step further. If a higher XRP price isn't required for the technology to function, why do so many experts still talk about it? The answer comes down to one word: efficiency. Think about an airline. A small airplane can carry passengers from New York to London. A much larger airplane can make the exact same trip. Both reach the same destination. The difference is how many people each one can carry in a single flight. Financial networks work in a similar way. The goal isn't simply to move money. The goal is to move large amounts of money quickly, efficiently, and with as little friction as possible. Now imagine a bank needs to settle a $500 million transaction. If XRP's market has deep liquidity and each token holds more value, fewer tokens may be needed to complete that transfer. That can reduce market impact and make very large transactions easier to execute. Again, notice the wording. We're talking about efficiency, not necessity. The XRP ledger doesn't suddenly stop working if XRP is worth $1. It simply means larger transactions may require moving more tokens. And that's why supporters often connect price with liquidity. Now let's clear up another misconception. Many people think a higher XRP price automatically means institutions will adopt it. That's not how adoption works. Banks don't choose financial infrastructure because they hope the asset price goes up. They care about reliability, regulatory clarity, transaction speed, settlement finality, security, and whether enough liquidity exists to support their payment needs. Price is only one small part of a much bigger picture. In fact, if the technology isn't solving a real problem, a high price by itself doesn't create utility. Utility has to come first. Price, if it changes, is generally a result of how the market values that utility over time. This is also where tokenization enters the conversation. Over the last few years, we've heard more discussion about tokenized real-world assets, things like bonds, real estate, treasury products, and other financial instruments moving onto blockchain networks. Some analysts believe that if trillions of dollars eventually move across blockchain infrastructure, the networks supporting that activity will require significant liquidity. That's one reason XRP is often mentioned in these discussions. Not because someone officially declared it must reach a certain price, but because people are asking a logical question. If dramatically more value flows through the network, how will liquidity scale with it? That's a reasonable discussion to have, but it's still different from saying XRP has to reach $1,000. Those are not the same claim, and this is where social media often oversimplifies the conversation. One side says XRP must be worth thousands of dollars. The other side says price doesn't matter at all. Reality is usually somewhere between those two extremes. Price alone doesn't create utility, but if utility grows significantly and demand for liquidity increases, it's understandable why people discuss whether higher valuations could make large-scale settlement more efficient. That doesn't tell us what XRP's future price will be. It simply explains why the conversation exists in the first place. So, does XRP actually need a high price? Not necessarily. The XRP ledger can function whether XRP is worth $1, $10, or much more. The technology doesn't depend on a specific price. But here's the key takeaway. If XRP is ever used to move significantly larger amounts of value between financial institutions, a higher market value could make those transfers more capital efficient by allowing the same amount of money to be represented with fewer tokens. That's the logic many people are referring to, not a guaranteed future price. Ultimately, price isn't what creates utility. Utility creates demand. And if demand continues to grow through real-world use cases like payments, tokenization, and digital asset infrastructure, the market will decide how XRP should be valued over time. So instead of asking, does XRP need to be worth $1,000? A better question is, can real-world adoption create enough demand for higher valuations? That's a much more useful conversation. Now I'd like to hear your opinion. Do you think XRP's future price will be driven mainly by utility, or do you believe other factors will play a bigger role? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read as many comments as I can. If you enjoyed this fact-based explanation and want more XRP videos that separate facts from speculation, make sure to like this video, subscribe to OG John XRP Insights, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.